All right, let's welcome in our guest in this segment. He is the new finance chair. And let me just say this, all right? I've known Jason since 2010. Jason Barrett, is that the first time you ran?
Yeah.
Okay. So nobody has pulled off what he has just pulled off that I'm aware of. Backs the wrong horse and ends up sitting in the winner's circle with the Triple Crown.
That's what Jason does.
Hey, if you're going to lose, you might as well win.
I'm going to quote you on that one. That's because I don't know anybody else who could have done this, but you did it. And I have mad respect for that move.
Thank you. Well, you give me a lot more credit than I deserve, but I appreciate it.
Just building up the legend, man.
Thank
Just
you.
building it up there. Jason, congratulations again on being finance chair.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You become not my new go-to guy for money in the state, and you have the numbers from January, as I understand it.
That's right. And for the month of January, we are just under $14 million under estimates. Some of that breakdown is personal income tax is down almost $3 million. Consumer sales is up 7.5. Severance tax is down $28 million. And that one, we've been under estimates on severance for a number of months. A lot of that is reflective in the cost of gas. But because the month ended on a weekend, I want to see if there's kind of going to be some bleed over into February. So we'll look at today's numbers and see if that's the case. But they are $28 million under estimate.
When you say bleed over into February, would that change the official January numbers or just enhance the February ones?
That's right.
Okay.
It will just enhance the February numbers. The corporate net is up $19 million, and then tobacco is down $2 million, which is fairly common. So at the end of, for year to date of this fiscal year, we're still $28 million above estimates. So we're still in the black by $28 million. It's just for the month of January, we were almost $14 million, $13.8 million under estimates.
What's the last month of the government's year?
June. So our
June
budget
30.
runs July 1 to June 30. And so the budget that we'll be working on starting next Wednesday. My date's straight. Next Wednesday will be the fiscal year 26 budget.
And when you mentioned about the severance and then you mentioned about gas, you meant natural gas.
That's right.
Right,
Yes,
not
natural
gasoline.
gas. Right. No. So obviously when the cost of per MCF goes down, that's good for the consumers. But for the state's budget, the severance is paid on that. So that's why you'll see, a bit of a dip in severance collection. Is
there concern about the state's finances at this time?
I don't think there's great concern. I think that, given some of the press conferences that our governors had to say that we're going to be in a tighter financial year, which we all expected because, there were some slight overspends in the past 2 years, primarily one of them being a pay raise for state employees, which they're clearly worthy of that. But we, at least in the Senate, have tried to keep this budget at no more than less than 3% growth. And so in the past couple of years, you could see that, some of those spends were a little bit more than that. Some of them in the back of the budget, some of them through supplemental appropriations. But so we just need to, go in. And I think that one of the best things about Governor Morrissey at the helm now is that we're going to get a lot more buy-in with trying to create efficiencies, trying to save money in state government. I mean, you've seen that he's, trying to take a couple of different agencies and merge them together in a cost-saving effort. I think that he will continue to do those things. So I'm not concerned. We are mindful that we are facing a bit of a deficit, but I'm confident that we can. That we'll pull through that without any problems. Remember that in the Personal Income Tax Reserve Fund, there's an excess of $400 million that we put in there to handle a situation like this.
How do you break the glass to use that money? What are the terms for using it?
It would just be a supplemental appropriation to do that. It's not really what I want to do, and I don't know that we're going to have to, but it is there in case we do. I mean, I think I think there's a lot of money in state agencies across our state government. So, going into that a personal income tax reduction fund would be, in my opinion, the step just before going into the rainy day fund, which we clearly don't want to do.
And those are two separate.
The three separate, actually. The personal income tax reduction fund is its own fund, and then there's rainy day A and B.
Right.
Rainy day B can't be touched until rainy day A is expired or exhausted.
Well, how much is in rainy day A?
I have it on my phone probably. I actually, Rob, just so you know, I received all of the January numbers minutes before I walked into the studio, so they are that fresh. So I'll get that for you. It's on my phone, but I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
Jason's here for the full hour. By the way, we'll get those numbers at halftime, so to speak.
Perfect.
All right, Mr.
Are those accounts in interest-bearing accounts?
Oh, yeah.
They're growing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Each of those accounts are growing and doing rather well.
Well, and for example, the personal income tax reduction fund, we put $400 million in there. I think there's something like 430, 440, something like that in that fund.
Yeah.
Mr. Gilstrap.
I get lost in the numbers. So we have billion-dollar surpluses for a couple of years in a row. And now we're $28 million ahead of where we wanted to be with only a few months left in the year. And we're projecting a $400 million deficit. What happens between now and June where we're going to lose $428 million?
Well, we're not. So remember that the surplus is for fiscal year 25, which ends on June 30th. The governor's projected $400 million deficit is for the fiscal year that starts on July 1, 25 and runs through June 30, 26.
So what is that landmine that's out there?
Well, I think that there are a few things. I think when we look at some of the tax cuts contributed to that, which is, I think our tax cuts somewhere in the 850 range now. I think it was about 750 before the last round of personal income tax cuts. Those things start to hit. Certainly Medicaid cost, PEIA is about $62 million. So all these things that are coming in our next fiscal year that we're going to have to deal with. So,
are these surprises?
No. Corrections is $47 million. That one might be a bit of a surprise, but a lot of that is from the medical expenses for inmates that have just gone up tremendously over the past number of years. So like I said before, we knew that some tough times were coming because of those couple of overspends, being the second round of personal income tax and the pay raise, which were in the $200+ million range, and then you combine that with both PEIA and Medicaid, that's how you get to another $200 million.
And this is just a different way of accounting too. Patrick's really the governor's trying to do a 6-year plan, correct?
Well,
go back to that.
Every governor has done a 6-year plan except for our previous one.
Okay.
And the 6-year plan, and we, as so many legislators, had pushed for former Governor Justice to give us a 6-year plan. And it happened very early on. He started it in his first year, I think, maybe 2, but I don't believe so. And the 6-year plans looked really, really bad. And it showed tremendous deficits. And I think that's why he didn't want to put them out there any longer, is because they were such doom and gloom. So he stopped doing them. Obviously, a tremendous amount of things happened. The 6-year plans were never going to be accurate because of COVID and everything that happened because of that kind of blew the 6-year plans out the window. So,
should you folks have gone above the trigger with the most recent income tax cut as requested by then Governor Jim Justice to do?
Well, I think when you're faced with a $400 million deficit, the easy answer is to say no. But again, I think we're going to get our hands on this. Anytime that we can cut taxes for working people of West Virginia, I think that's a good thing. That was really pushed by the governor. I think it was his last spike of the football before he left office. We had some real concerns in the Senate about doing that. I think the House was a little more ambitious to do it. We ultimately decided, we could afford it because, again, of that personal income tax reduction fund, because there are a lot of money laying around in state government that I think that we'll utilize and identify. So at the end of the day, it's not going to be any type of any real issue. I think that we'll manage through it. It won't be a big problem, but it's easy to say we should have waited.
Do any of the federal spending freezes apply to funds that West Virginia currently gets?
I received more calls about that, some of those freezes more than I've received calls about anything else. There were a lot of people concerned, especially things that are funded by the Department of Health, things that affect children and families. So yeah, that could be a real concern. Absolutely.
Do we have any idea what that might amount to dollar-wise?
Not at the moment, no. Obviously, it's something that is at the forefront of the committee, and something that we're going to try to wrap our arms around to figure out what that number could and would be.
Are you in touch with Senator Capito, Representative Moore, or Senator Justice to find out that information?
We have not yet, no.
Is there a plan to do that?
There is not currently one, but I think that we will, again, get our arms around that. We will find the answers to that to make sure that we know what we're dealing with. But, Senator Capito's offices on a number of issues that I've dealt with have always been really great to work with. So we will get that information, sure.
You have to construct a budget for the state by when?
June 30th?
Yeah.
June 30th. And your
Yeah.
legislative session ends when?
April 12th. And our goal, and I think that is a realistic goal, and I think that we'll hit it without any issue, is to have that budget out by the end of the 60-day session.
How much, regarding the uncertainty of the federal spending freeze, how much does that weigh on the budget that you'll have to construct?
It could play a huge role. I think that we'll start to get some more answers as we work through the process. But again, we'll work off of the governor's introduced budget, and so I'm interested to see how his budget is put together. Interested to see what his revenue estimates are, and as you know, the legislature has the power of appropriation. We don't have the power to set the revenue numbers.
Correct.
And so the revenue estimates are completely and totally set by the governor, and we'll work within that dollar amount to put a budget together. Obviously, trying to give him as much deference as possible with his introduced budget, but certainly members of the House and Senate have priorities as well.
Will you will you still be incorporating a flatline budget style that Senate President Blair had incorporated?
It's my goal, and I've made this clear, I think, to both the president and to the caucus, is that I don't want to see our budget expenditure go above that 3% above last year. Now, I would be thrilled if our current governor put a budget out that was less than that. But my goal is to keep it at that 3% or less. We have fiscal year 25 is a $5.2 billion budget. 3% of that would obviously be $156 million above that 5.2.
Governor Justice had fairly low revenue estimates during his tenure, and those were exceeded. Sometimes, I guess, artificially high, some said, because the revenue estimates were so low. And then we saw a lot of backfilling at the end of the fiscal year. Sometimes some enormous backfilling took place. Do you anticipate Governor Morrisey approaching this with a similar style or more realistic estimates for the revenues?
To be honest, I don't know. I would anticipate Governor Morrisey trying to be a little more transparent. Is my sense that he would put a little bit more realistic revenue estimates out there. But when you do that, you have to realize that the legislature does have the authority to go spend it. And so that's why I think that the way in which Governor Justice did the revenue estimates, I think there was a lot of buy-in from legislative leadership to do it that way, to be able to control some spending, and then just go back in and use supplemental appropriations or use surplus section funding to be able to do that.
Which would you prefer be done, considering you've been through the justice system?
Sure.
And you've been through, I think you came in at the end of the Tomlin governorship too at one point, right?
Yeah, I was first elected in 12, so I served 13 and 14 with Governor Tomlin.
Right, okay. So you've been through a couple different systems here.
Yeah, my preference really is to put everything on the table, to have a real understanding. This is the revenue estimates. It's legitimate. And then it's up to the legislature then to have the discipline to not get out over our skis and to spend the appropriate amount of money. I'm certainly willing to do that in Senate Finance to hold the line. And I understand that what comes with the job is telling a lot of people no. And that a lot of times Senate Finance is the graveyard for a lot of bills. And I don't have any problems with it continuing to be that. We have a constitutional obligation to have a balanced budget. We have made a priority to give tax cuts to the people of West Virginia. Certainly there are programs and things that the state does that we have to fund and fund appropriately. We'll do those. And I think some of them, probably need some increases. And you heard from one of those this morning. But it's my preference, to get back to your question, my preference is to put everything on the table. Let's do it all above board. Let's do everything we can in the general revenue section of the budget, but we'll hold the line and not get start spending money the way we shouldn't.
Mike, I couldn't help but notice you're chuckling during the "if there's money in the budget, the legislature will spend it" segment.
I go back and look at my conversations with Eric Household over the years. Keeping that revenue estimate artificially low was their tactic to make sure that people didn't just overspend, and spending one-time money versus putting something in the general budget. I think Jason's right. If you keep everything on top of the table, I think you got to hold the line, and I think Vern Chris is where bills go to die on the House side. He's the chair of finance, and he does hold the line, so I think we can.
If I remember, during the Tomlin and Eric or Colin, I believe we have a line ringing up top there. That's not for us, but I can hear the ring on the air here. During the Tomlin administration, there was a time when you had to go back in and find money and also make some cuts. I think I remember Shepherd losing some money at one point along the way. Then you had to go back in and raise cigarette taxes and something to that effect. Do you remember what I'm talking about here?
I do remember, but I wasn't in the legislature during the cigarette tax issue, which was an increase to fill some of the budget gap. There were mid-year cuts a couple of years, and I think they went into the rainy day fund a little bit as well.
Yeah, you just shut that door there to your left, Mike. That was Bill Stubblefield's job. I forgot to tell you your job responsibilities once you take the Stubblefield seat.
Already failed.
Yeah. And obviously you don't want to repeat that. You don't want to have to go back in and start stripping money from the budgets of people that thought they had it.
Right. And I don't think that I want to make it clear, I don't want to scare anybody out there. I don't think you're going to see, going in and taking money from Shepherd or any other university. We do have a funding formula in place now. That I think that it's my goal, and as the Senate Finance Chairman, what I want to do is honor that funding formula as best we can. I mean, that was something that was worked on by a lot of legislators over the past number of years to ensure that we are treating our higher education colleges and universities fairly. In the past, several years ago, back really. Kind of when the Democrats were in charge of the legislature, the Senate Finance Chairman, you could always tell where the Senate Finance Chairman was from because the university or CTC in their district or county was funded at enormous levels, and that, or if you were the Senate President at times, that happened. And so we've really gotten away from that, which I applaud. People in my position before now that really treated all these institutions fairly, and we putting in a funding formula has really shown that we're trying to treat everyone fair.
Has Shepherd and Blue Ridge been brought up to the funding levels that other schools in the state enjoy?
Yeah, they're getting there for sure. I don't know that I have to look at the breakdown, but they have seen they were some of the biggest winners of the funding formula because they were always woefully underfunded as it related to enrollment, to performance, to all those things. So I always told them it was somebody had to be last, but we should at least been respectfully last, and they weren't even respectfully last. So the funding formula has helped them for sure.
Oh, it definitely has. In House education, we see that obviously.
So lean times put pressure on counties and municipalities. Is this the perfect time to pass legislation that allows for referenda at the local level for 1% sales tax if that's what they want?
Well, the municipality doesn't need that. The municipality already has.
At the county level,
municipality already has the ability through home rule to go in and institute a 1% sales tax without the say of city residents. So they clearly have that ability now. I think as it relates to the county, I think that putting it on the ballot for the people to decide is probably the right way to do it. And I think that that there are ways in which the county can raise money without the people agreeing to it. And so I think it would come down to, do you want the county to raise money in a way that is solely hit on the backs of residents of Berkeley County or the county, or do you want the ability to institute a sales tax, which would apply to anyone that spends money in Berkeley County. So I think that's a fundamental question that voters will ask themselves if it's put on the ballot.
Yeah, I think. Good, John.
Do you think it will make it past the legislature so that people will have the opportunity to see it on a ballot?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It's possible. I think that the fact that it's a referendum and allowing local control and allowing the people to decide, I think gives it its best shot for sure.
It's the first I've heard any hope out of that legislation. The proposition.
Mike's shaking his head no.
I think there's still a lot to be looked into. I haven't actually seen the legislation. I know what we're talking about. But I'd also like to see that referendum come back again and again, like a police levy or a school levy or bond, just to keep the counties in line. So there's still lots to be worked on and a lot of people to get on board before we can talk about that in real terms, in my mind.
I think there is at times some confusion, and I'll use the generic term "the show" from our listeners and viewers who think the show is in favor of a 1% sales tax. What I'm in favor of is letting the residents have the opportunity in a referendum form to vote on it. That's what I'm in favor of. Whether residents vote no or yes, I don't care one way or the other. I'm in favor of consistency. And when Republicans run for office, they talk about local control all the time. The best government is the government closest to the people. And you can't get closer to the people than county government. So if county residents don't want a 1% sales tax, they can vote no. But I think it's hypocritical of Republicans to say, I'm for local control, except for this and that, and then this other thing over here, and whatever I think might get me voted out of office because they're going to blame it on me. I'm not for that then, but I'm for local control for everything else. But and if I come up with something else I'm not, I'll bring that up later on. You're either for it or you're not.
You know, the most convincing argument for this that I heard has nothing to do with Eastern Panhandle. It's actually in wherever Snowshoe is, the ski resort, the pressure that is put on the emergency services during ski season for just the transportation and managing of the injured people, as well as just traffic management and such. And all of that is on the backs of the locals with no outside assistance.
Right, and I think
probably
the 1% sales tax isn't the best option for them, but the amusement tax probably is. So if you can charge $1 tax on a ski lift ticket,
yes,
I think that's what you would do, rather than putting it on the backs of the people that live there.
Mm-hmm.
With only 3,000 residents in that county.
And someone's volume is up on their phone. Would that be you, Mr. Barrett?
I can't believe it, but yes.
Is that a show faux pas?
I always have my volume down. It's because I was listening to the show before I got here. Does that make it better?
You know who used to do that all the time was Bill, and he's like 85. So you're in good company.
Wow, what an insult.
Do you know how to take pictures on your phone?
Bill can show me.
That's beautiful. Hey, in a week or so, you guys start to get into it a little bit here with how the sausage is made, so to speak. And we start to talk about these numbers. They become real numbers, mm-hmm. right? And you got a lot to factor in and what have you. So first and foremost, can we assume that raises for state employees are off the table?
I don't want to say that. I mean, I don't want to speak for the entire legislature or the caucus. The way that I'm approaching this, right or wrong, it's the way I'm doing it, is that, that 3% is where I really want to hold the line. And that's where I really don't want to see us spend above and beyond that. And I hope that we're under that. But it's really kind of up to the Senate caucus, as I view it, to prioritize where some of that spending is, at least in our budget. And the House will go through their process. But so I really don't want to say things are off the table or we're absolutely going to do things because I think that undermines the rest of the caucus, and I don't really want to do that.
And I think we'll find out Wednesday night when the governor does his State of the State. If it's a priority of the governor's, then we will make that happen, if you will.
This is your second term, Mike.
Yeah.
Jason, on and off since 2010. I think 12. Okay, very good. And Republicans have been in charge since 2016?
14.
15
session.
15 session. Okay, very good. Have you succeeded in cutting quote-unquote waste, fraud, and abuse to the point where you've got government spending down to the levels you want it to be, or is there still more work to be done? The governor thinks there is.
I think there's still tons of work to be done as far as reducing the size of government and reducing regulation.
Well, let's start with reducing the size of government first. Where's the easy target? Where's the low-hanging fruit, or have you already taken that out?
Well, I think, a lot of the easy things have happened over the past decade where, we've gone in and swept a lot of accounts. I mean, there were special revenue accounts in state government that had tremendous amounts of money in them. The legislature pulled some of that back and trying to get more of these agencies more reliant on special revenue. Special revenue is money that the agency generates through fees or licenses or some fee for the work that they do. A lot of our Board of Public Works, whether it's the auditor's office or something like that, a lot of their money is generated through special revenue. There are very little general revenue given to some of those offices. So, I think a lot of the easy stuff has been done. I don't think there's ever a point where you say that you stop looking for ways to save money and ways to cut government. I don't think that you ever stop doing that. Because I think as soon as you stop doing that, you revert back to the way it was prior to 2015.
So that was dealing with revenues. What about expenses? What are ways that you hope to cut expenses if the easy stuff's been done already?
Well, I think that, obviously we have to have a lot of buy-in from the governor. The governor is the one that's there every day. These agencies are there every day. The legislature's there for 60 days. So, we have to have cooperation with the executive branch to be able to do any of that. And I think that, what I've said repeatedly is that I think we'll get a lot more of that support from this administration than we did the past one. So a lot of this is going to be the executive branch and these agencies identifying ways to do that. And I think that you've seen some consolidation of some state agencies. For example, arts, culture, and history is going to go under tourism. And there are a couple other examples that the governor has come out and said that changes he's making in an effort to save money. And I think that I think that you would see over the next 4 years, he's going to continue to look at those things.
Taking that example, where is the savings?
Well, I don't. That's hard to answer.
Theoretically, I mean, just in general.
It should be in administration. It should be how many. There's probably a lot of redundancy in doing the same job twice as opposed to
personnel,
once.
Essentially.
I think it's personnel. It's probably, when you look at tourism and the things that tourism does to market our state, to draw people in here, some of the things that attract people to West Virginia are actually under arts, culture, and history. Those are things that bring people into the state as well. So I think it makes great sense to put that into tourism, and certainly our tourism secretary, in my view, is second to none. So I think that there will be a fair amount of savings and more efficiency in government by doing it that way. So that's one example. But again, I'm not on the front lines. I'm not in that agency every day to be able to say this position or that position or we're duplicating services here or there, and it's able to do that. But I think that the administration who is there on the ground every day understands those things, and I think that's why they've put together a couple of those examples.
From where I sit, when you hear about these consolidations and such, it often seems like new letterhead and business cards. It just, where is the savings when you take, even with DHS or R, whatever that, the agencies when it was broken up, did that end up saving a lot of money? Did it end up costing money? Did it, I don't know.
Does anybody know?
Does anybody know?
Well, we haven't really got through that yet. We're still in the process of splitting that up and how it looks like and what efficiencies we can. But we have found that since splitting it up, I don't speak for Jason, but we have found efficiencies within each of those, and we're addressing them as they come up. So I think that was a good move. I do agree with Jason. I think when you can combine agencies, it will make them more efficient. You might not have as many bureaucrats or administrators at the top.
So you had 8 years of Republican control under Jim Justice. The last 6+ of those were with him as a Republican governor. The implication I'm getting is that he prevented you from making, let's call it, efficiency changes in government. We can call that downsizing or making services more efficient. Is that what I'm getting from that?
Well, I really, this has to be led by the executive branch. And so what I would say is that they didn't lead that charge of creating efficiencies, trying to figure out ways to save money the way that I expect the current administration to do. So it's very hard for the legislature to initiate a lot of that. Now we can and we have, but again, it's a 60-day session. The agencies ultimately fall under the executive branch. The power that we have is over the purse, making changes to law that impacts them. But really, the day-to-day operation is overseen by the executive branch.
Are people in the right places? And I'll explain what I mean by that. So most of the government agencies, when we talk to people, are understaffed. You correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but when I talk to
certainly
somebody,
always say they're understaffed.
they certainly always say, and there's always a backlog, especially when it deals with social services. Is there a department that's got way more people than they need, and we could just reassign them to doing the administrative things in social services? Because social services seems to be woefully understaffed whenever we talk to them.
I think you've got to look at it from, we fund these agencies at positions, full-time employees. There are agencies that are getting the funds for the full-time employees, but they are not hiring the full-time employees for whatever reason. They could be low-paying jobs, there's not enough people in the workforce, whatever it is, but they're still getting the money for 4,500, whatever that number is for a full-time employee.
And
So
what happens to that money
that
when it's not spent on salary?
goes into their agency and it rolls over, or they spend it on other stuff. And those are the kind of things we're trying to stop from.
All right, that's a good explanation. That's the first time I've gotten some clarity on that one, so I appreciate that explanation there. So when you're setting up a budget and someone is saying we need funding for 500 positions, but can you see on the books that they only have 400?
Well, you have to ask the questions, and they'll answer, no, we have 312 employees. And okay, so how many years have you had 312 employees? Oh, we've had the same amount of employees for 6 years. Well, maybe you don't need 450 employees because you've been doing the job for 6 years with whatever that number I said before. So, but I think to Jason's point, we have a real opportunity to work with the governor this session. When you looked at how, when Jim came in and he brought out the platter, he upset a lot of legislators from both sides of the aisle. And it left a bad taste in the mouth. So the agencies were always coming on the defensive, right? Mm-hmm. We have a real opportunity to work with the agency now to go, hey, we want to fix this issue. Let's just say Bertha 3. We can now talk with them, figure out what we can do to fix the issue. It's not necessarily running a bill that, oh, you're doing it all wrong, we're going to tell you how to do it. Why don't we work together to actually fix the policy and the problem that we're trying to fix? And I think that's the thing that I know the House is really interested in working on.
So where's the tail and where's the dog here? Jason, you said that really depending on the executive. So if there's agency A that is funded at $100 million, but then the legislature says, no, you're really only funded for $50 million. Let executive make that work. It seems to me that it's the legislature that is actually driving the executive. In that circumstance, if the legislature controls the purse, the legislature controls the executive. Is it not that way?
Well, theoretically, it could be. I mean, there are not a lot of cases where the legislature comes in and says, I don't know of any case that the legislature would come in and cut
that's draconian, obviously.
The appropriation by half.
Right.
But, I mean, it's our job to, what we do, one of the things that we do in finance in the first 30 days is to bring every agency into the committee to get them to explain to us why they need the appropriation they need. And, there are times when there's a reduction in their appropriation. There's sometimes that they may get a higher appropriation. I mean, all these agencies bring their proposed budget to the governor, and then the governor can and probably does at times tell them to, no, that's too much, or no, you need more. I mean, the governor has the ultimate say in what that budget, how that budget is presented to the legislature. And there was an example of Department of Homeland Security as in the past as it related to deferred maintenance in our prisons, and we had the former secretary come up to finance, Senate Finance, a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, we have these deficiencies of in excess of $100 or $200 million in our correction facilities," and really made the legislature look bad for not appropriating this money when we're showing billions of dollars in surplus. And I just pointed out to them that your budget request is not for that amount of money. So when that agency or the executive gives us the budget request, we're trying to give them some deference to say, okay, you identified this is the money that you need. So when I questioned the secretary, well, how much money did you ask for? And it just flat out refused to answer the question because the governor's office said, no, you're not going to get that much money. Don't ask for it. And so, that is what we have kind of dealt with over the past number of years that I hope that we can get beyond, and I think we will moving forward.
So, now, Mike, you mentioned also reducing regulation to save money. What bodies of regulation are you looking at?
So, I'm on rulemaking review. So regulation, the increase in fees, agencies try to increase fees all the time for their special revenue. We have some archaic regulation within the state of West Virginia, like
Other than whole milk.
Well, you can look at alcohol. You can look at regulation when it comes to septic systems, the building codes. Anything.
The licensing for
cosmetology.
Yeah.
I mean, to become a barber in the state, you basically got to become a doctor and cut. I mean, it's hair; it grows back. The amount of that.
Not always it doesn't. Sometimes it just goes away.
I'm realizing that I'm almost 50. So, but no, there's some things that just need to be deregulated, and obviously I'm not an expert in everything, but through rulemaking review, we get to see all the rules that the agencies make. And that's when I question, go, why do you need 950 hours to get your license for this?
Can the legislature change that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's one of those things that, the way I look at some of these occupational licenses, if you're in a trade that, let's say you're an electrician, clearly there should be a license for that. You're running wires that could cause a fire in someone's home. It's all behind the wall. You can't see it. Getting a haircut. If somebody gives me a bad haircut, I just don't go back. So to have a license for that, I think is in continuing education. I think is a little silly. These people are doing this every day. They know. Again, if you give somebody a bad haircut, they just don't come back. West Virginia, for example, was talking about electric and plumbing and all those things, HVAC. Those things all should have license. But when you, like for drywall, okay, you don't do a very good job of hanging drywall, they just don't call you back. I mean, can you see the tape lines? Are there nails popping through? So West Virginia is one of the very few states that actually require a license to hang drywall. And so it's those type of things that really,
other than a business license?
Right. Yeah, the individuals have to have a license to hang drywall.
The guy with the stilts on his feet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Is that common around our bordering states?
No, West Virginia is one of the very few states that require that. And
That's
so then you have
interesting.
people from the state, the Department of Labor within the state, that go around checking all this.
And most of the time, it's one person's got the license and everybody else is doing the work, and nobody has the license.
Right.
So what's the point of the license?
My thought on that was that this state always was looking to generate revenue any way it could because the income levels were not up to what the services were necessary to have. So they figured they would just fee and that sort of thing on everything that they could to generate revenue.
Well, I mean, there is a benefit. I mean, there are certain things that should be charged for.
Sure.
That's where this special revenue comes in because, when you have to have a license, an appropriate license, clearly you should have to pay for that. And the cost that our people pay for licenses should be enough to operate the agency that oversees that. Because if it
just
doesn't,
to cover the cost.
If it doesn't, then the taxpayers are funding that, which they shouldn't do. So, but for every dollar that is collected in special revenue, that's a dollar that the taxpayers don't have to pay in the general revenue. So there's a benefit to some of that.
We've got about 5 minutes left till the final commercial break here. What's the big lift this legislative session? Any idea, or do you have to wait to see what the governor's priorities are first?
Well, it may be a little premature to say what the biggest one is prior to seeing the governor's revenue estimates and budget. But, I think PEIA is going to continue to be a challenge. Some Medicaid is going to be a challenge. BRIM is going to be a challenge. So, we have enough things on our plate that we don't need any surprises. But, I think that you'll see the working relationship with the House, the Senate, and the governor's office be really good, and I think we'll be able to address all of those things.
Is expanded access to the Hope Scholarship a concern fiscally?
Potentially. I mean, there are. That's one of the things that I think I don't want to say divides. That's not appropriate. There are differing opinions of legislators about that. I think there are some that say we need to rein it in a little bit because it's going to cost too much, and there are others that say, look, this is the bill we passed a number of years ago. We knew this was coming. Some of those numbers are inflated. And it's the right thing to do for taxpayers. It has certainly been a priority of the legislature, and it's my goal that we don't limit the Hope Scholarship, that we are able to move forward with it as is. But we have to look at the budget and be able to prioritize spending. But it's my preference to leave it alone.
By the way, Treasurer Larry Pack will be on the show Wednesday morning at 8:30. We'll get into more of the Hope Scholarship and some specifics on funding at that time. But Mike, do you sense a similar attitude in the House?
Yeah, I think PEI is something we have to address. It's to the point where we're seeing it's not feasible the way we're doing. I think the BRIM insurance is another thing for the schools.
When did the BRIM thing come up? Because it's the first I'm hearing anybody mention BRIM.
This is an issue that's been building for years because there's so many agencies and that are involved.
And BRIM is what, by the way?
It's the public. It's the public entities where
risk and insurance
management. Yes.
Okay.
So, but because we have so many other agencies jumping on board, and because there's so many lawsuits these days and so many abuse cases across the United States, it's really risen their rates up. So, we have to look at that. I think on the House side, I think you're going to see I think you're going to see the vaccine freedom. They're going to codify what Patrick has already put into effect with his order. I think you'll see trying to address some CON. I think that's, and again, I'm just speaking from what I hear from the caucus.
Certificate of need is CON, by the way. If you're new to the show, new to the area, that's going to be a very interesting issue as it plays out in this legislative session. Jason, before you go, can you recap the January revenue numbers again? Do you have those handy?
I do, yes. So for January, our general revenue collections were $13.8 million under estimates. A couple of those, the larger revenue sources, personal income tax, we were down just under $3 million. Consumer sales up about $7.5 million, and severance tax $28 million below estimates. And Rob, I did get you the number on the rainy day funds. It's $1.3 billion.
Total for the two
rainy day funds.
Do you know what they are individually?
I don't have it broken down, but
is the one B is generally bigger than A, is it not? Or is A bigger than B? Do I have it in reverse order?
I can't remember that off the top of my head. B is where the tobacco settlement money is. So I think that I don't know which one's larger, but I know that we can't get into B until you exhaust A. But I think B might be larger. I'll look it up.
Are there programs in place that you're still doing today from the tobacco settlement money?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I can't tell you that off the top of my head, but I'm sure that there are tobacco cessation that we're still doing. Yes.
All right. It'd be interesting to learn a bit more about that too. I wonder who do you go to talk to? Is that under health?
Yeah.
Yes.
Get Height back on the show before he goes. Height, you're on the clock, man. Jason, thank you. That you agreed to do the whole hour, and I appreciate you doing what you do.
Thanks for having me.
Mogul?
Thank you, sir.
You're getting used to this pinch hitting, aren't you?
I like it.
Just in time to leave.
Just right. Now I get to call in.
Yeah, back with the final minute next.